The phone clatters to the courtroom floor, its cracked screen glowing with a photo that makes the bailiff freeze. All eyes snap to Dylan Johnson, an 11-year-old black boy drowning in his uncle's borrowed suit. Judge Harrison, a white man with 3 decades on the bench, leans forward. "Son, are you afraid to be here today?" Dylan's gaze locks onto Reverend Walker, the white pastor who baptized him, gave him candy, and once whispered, "Our secret stays between us and God." "No, sir," Dylan says, voice steady. "I'm not afraid anymore." The prosecutor fires. "What did you find in Reverend Walker's office?" Chaos erupts. The deacon screams lies. The pastor's wife faints. Through the uproar, Dylan's hand grips his grandmother's crucifix, the one she gave him with the words, "Being black here means being braver than everyone else." "I found a box," he begins. Reverend Walker starts to laugh, a low, unsettling sound. "What was in the box?" Watch now to uncover the secret that brought a powerful man to his knees. The prosecutor takes a step back, letting Dylan's statement settle over the courtroom. A sense of urgency grips every corner. Even the faint hum of the ceiling fans seems to halt as all focus remains locked on the black little boy. "Dylan," the prosecutor says in a calmer tone, "can you tell us how it all started?" "Take your time." Dylan's fingers curl around the edge of the stand. His breath is uneven as he begins to speak. "It started with Sundays," he says quietly. "Sundays used to be my favorite day." A flashback draws everyone into Dylan's memory. Those early morning diner visits with his mom, the only day she didn't work 2 shifts in a row. They'd share pancakes and talk about their week, cherishing whatever precious time they had before heading to church. Dylan distills that memory into a few tender images, not lingering too long on the details. Reverend Walker always greeted them with a warm handshake. But even then, Dylan recalls how his smile didn't reach his eyes. Walker crouched to Dylan's level, asking about favorite subjects in school, what he wanted to be when he grew up. It made Dylan feel special, in a way almost no one else had. But everything changed on a quiet Sunday after the service. "Dylan," Reverend Walker had said in that inviting voice, "could you help me carry some boxes down to the basement? I need a strong helper like you." Dylan remembers the pride he felt, following Walker down to the dimly lit basement that smelled of mildew and damp wood. At first nothing seemed off, just old hymn books and decorations to move. But then Walker's hand stayed on Dylan's shoulder a moment too long. That first time, Dylan hesitates, voice trembling in the present-day courtroom. "He put his hand on my shoulder. It felt weird, like it stayed there too long." He glances at the jury, eyes pleading for understanding. "I thought maybe it was nothing." But it happened again and again. Dylan's mother, seated in the gallery, presses a tissue to her mouth, tears streaking her cheeks. She had no idea. She trusted Walker like everyone else did. "He said it was our little game." Dylan continues softly, "that if I told anyone, God would punish me." Several jury members look away, disturbed. But Dylan presses on. "It wasn't until months later," he says, "when I overheard my mom talking about another boy who stopped coming to church. Then I realized I wasn't the only one, and I couldn't just stay quiet." The prosecutor speaks again, cautiously. "Lie. Dylan, you're so brave for coming forward. What finally made you tell your mom?" He swallows, looking down at his hands. "Because I knew other kids were being hurt too. I couldn't let him keep doing it." The gallery erupts with whispers until the judge's gavel quells the noise. Reverend Walker sits stiffly at the defense table, face pale. His lawyer whispers urgently, but Walker's expression remains unreadable. "Thank you, Dylan," the prosecutor says, emotion lacing her voice. "You've done the right thing." The judge nods toward Dylan. "You may step down." As Dylan walks back, his mother draws him into a fierce hug. He feels her tremble, hears her whispered words. "I'm so proud of you, baby." For a moment the courtroom seems to hold its breath, tension sparking like static in the air. Everyone knows this is only the beginning. Dylan's testimony echoes like a bell that cannot be unrung. He has cracked the pristine image Reverend Walker cultivated for years. Tension escalates further when the prosecutor turns to the judge, holding Dylan's phone in a protective evidence bag. "Your Honor," she says, "we'd like to submit the photograph Dylan mentioned." The defense lawyer leaps up. "Objection. This evidence hasn't been authenticated." The judge's gavel falls. "Overruled. Proceed, counselor." The bailiff carefully hands the small cracked phone to the judge, then to the jury. The hush in the gallery is thick with anticipation. Reverend Walker shifts in his seat, his usual calm replaced by faint agitation. This isn't just a photo, the prosecutor explains to the jury. Her tone taut, it's evidence. An 11-year-old's desperate attempt to gather proof. A child's cry for help. She shifts her focus to Dylan on the witness stand. Tell us, how did you come by this image? Dylan's voice trembles. Reverend Walker asked me to get his Bible from his office. When I opened the drawer, I saw a box. It had photos. Some of me, some of other kids. I got scared and left. But later I went back with my phone and took a picture. I didn't know what else to do. The gallery erupts in murmurs, the tension almost tangible. Dylan's mother closes her eyes, pained while supporting friends pat her shoulders. Dylan, the prosecutor presses, did Reverend Walker threaten you if you ever told anyone? A tear slips down Dylan's cheek. He said, God would punish me, that nobody would believe me. The judge calls for a recess, and the courtroom clears. In the corridor, Dylan stands beside his mother. She kneels down, brushing away his tears. You're so brave, she whispers. So brave. Dylan's voice quivers. Do you think they believe me? She cradles his chin, forcing him to meet her eyes. Yes, they do. And even if some don't, the truth is on our side. The recess is brief, barely enough time to breathe. When court resumes, the prosecutor stands again, her energy renewed. Your Honor, she says. We have a witness who approached us after hearing Dylan's testimony. A tall man named Eric steps forward. He looks terrified, his hands shaking as he's sworn in. What brings you here? The prosecutor asks gently. Eric's gaze flickers to Dylan, gratitude mingling with guilt. My son Tyler used to be in the church choir. He quit suddenly a year ago. I never knew why, until yesterday. His voice cracks. He told me Reverend Walker hurt him too. Sharp gasps radiate across the room. The defense lawyer jumps up. Objection. Hearsay. Overruled, the judge says, looking almost weary. The witness may continue. Eric's eyes brim with tears. Tyler said he was afraid that no one would believe him because Reverend Walker was this pillar of the community. When we heard Dylan's story, we realized it wasn't just him. The prosecutor turns to the jury, a fierce gleam in her eye. This trial is revealing a pattern of abuse. Dylan isn't alone. Reverend Walker fidgets in his seat, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His lawyer frantically scribbles notes. The tension in the courtroom feels ready to combust. At the end of the day, the judge announces another recess. Dylan and his mom step outside, escorted by officers. The crowd has swelled since morning. On one side, signs read, Believe Dylan and protect our kids. On the other, Innocent until proven guilty. And stop the witch hunt. A man yells viciously, Lying kid. Another glaring voice cries, Walker's done nothing wrong. Police form a protective wall, urging Dylan and his mom through the throng. Dylan's heart pounds, but he notices the glint of the crucifix in his hand.
Als.
His grandmother's crucifix, and squeezes it.
Als.
They reach their car. A few furious protesters surge forward, and one man grabs Dylan's mom by the arm.
Als.
Yanking her back. The police intervene, forcing him away.
Ooh. Are you okay, ma'am?
An officer asks, breath coming heavy from restraining the attacker. She nods shakily, hustling Dylan into the car. Her hands tremble on the steering wheel. Dylan sees bruises forming on her arm. That was horrible, he says, voice small. She starts the engine.
Oh, we'll get through it,
she whispers.
I promise.
Each day of the trial fans the flames of conflict in the community. The courthouse steps become a battleground of protest signs. Police try to keep both sides apart, but anger flares. People who once worshipped together now stand on opposite lines, hurling accusations. Inside, a new witness is sworn in. Lisa, who Dylan met in a brief hallway exchange. She clutches a tissue, cheek streaked with tears. Please tell the court why you've come forward, the prosecutor says gently. Lisa steadies herself on the stand. My son Marcus played piano for the church. Reverend Walker always encouraged him, said he had a gift from God. But one day Marcus refused to go back. I thought he was just being moody. Then, after hearing Dylan's testimony, I confronted him, and he broke down. She exhales shakily, choosing her words. Marcus said Reverend Walker touched him, told him to keep quiet or God would punish him. A heavy silence grips the courtroom. Angry whispers spread among Walker's supporters. Some bury their faces in their hands. Others throw hateful glares at Dylan and Lisa. "Thank you," the prosecutor says, turning to address the jury. "This is no longer one boy's story. We're seeing multiple consistent accounts." When court adjourns for lunch, Dylan's mother leads him to a quiet corner behind the building. He clings to her hand, still shaken by the morning's intensity. She notices the crucifix around his neck. "You still have Grandma's cross," she says, voice hushed. Dylan nods, fingertips brushing the worn metal. "I need it." She wraps an arm around him, protective. "Remember, you're braver than you feel. You always have been." He tries to manage a small smile as they head back inside. That afternoon, Eric returns to the stand. The defense aims to discredit him, claiming he has a personal vendetta against Walker. Eric stands firm. He's a pillar of the community. Sure, Eric concedes. But what does that matter if he's harming kids? In the crowd, more supporters gather for Dylan, wearing pins or brandishing signs that say, "Dylan's voice equals sign, truth." On the other side, Walker's longtime congregation members still refuse to believe it. Outside, tension boils over once again, shouting, threats, even a few minor scuffles. Riot police are called in to form a human blockade around the courthouse entrance. Dylan tries to tune out the cacophony, focusing on the echo of his grandmother's final words to him. Being black here means being braver than everyone else. When the court reconvenes, the prosecutor stands with a stack of documents. Her posture is unyielding. "Your Honor, we've uncovered additional materials from Reverend Walker's personal computer," she announces. These emails, and other files, shed more light on his activities. Walker's lawyer jumps up. "Objection, lack of prior disclosure." The judge silences him with a stern glare. Overruled. The prosecutor hands evidence folders to the bailiff, who distributes them to the judge and jury. "We have decrypted emails showing the purchase of hidden cameras, mentions of photographing certain subjects for personal use, and explicit instructions to keep items labeled church property hidden from view." Gasps break out. Even some of Walker's supporters in the gallery seem uneasy. The prosecutor continues, voice tight with anger. "These communications also mention a journal, which we recovered from Reverend Walker's locked desk. Inside, he detailed interactions with specific children." She glances at Dylan, who looks down, cheeks flushed with emotion. She flips open the worn leather-bound journal. Right here, in his own handwriting. Dylan helpful, trusting, easy to manipulate. Another wave of shock spreads through the room. A spectator bursts into tears. The defense lawyer tries to call it forged, but the judge allows it. The prosecutor's gaze sweeps the jury. He didn't just commit these acts spontaneously. He planned them, documented them, and convinced these children God would punish them for telling. This is the pattern of a predator. Reverend Walker's face is drained of color. His lawyer leans in, whispering frantically, but Walker doesn't respond. Dylan stares at the pastor, recalling the first time he sensed something evil behind the man's kindly facade. By day's end, the tension is at a breaking point. As Dylan and his mom reach their car, they find another note pinned to the windshield. "Drop the case or else." His mom storms over to a nearby officer, thrusting the note in his face. "Are threatening my child and me. What are you going to do about this?" The officer's expression turns grave. "We'll increase patrols near your house. Stay vigilant." That night, Dylan sits in his small bedroom, turning the threat note over in his hands. Finally, he pins it to his wall, next to other scribbled reminders. A subtle defiance flickers in his eyes. "I won't quit," he murmurs. "I'm not alone." The next morning, the defense calls Reverend Walker himself to the stand. A hush descends as he steps forward, smoothing the collar of his shirt. Gone is his confident grin. Tension seeps through his every movement. His lawyer begins softly. "Reverend Walker, how have these allegations affected you?" Walker sighs, shaking his head. "They've destroyed my life, my reputation. I've served God my whole life. To suggest I'd harm even one child, let alone many, is unthinkable." Members of his congregation sniffle, dabbing at tears. Walker glances at Dylan, something dark flickering in his gaze. "Reverend," the lawyer presses, "what do you say to Dylan's claim that you laughed at him?" Walker's eyes narrow slightly, a hint of the old arrogance surfacing. "I laughed because I never believed anyone would take an 11-year-old's lies so seriously," he admits, voice tinged with scorn. "I'm a man of God." The prosecutor strides forward for cross-examination. You call them lies, Reverend. Yet multiple witnesses, some of whom never met Dylan, share the same experiences. We also have your journal, your emails, your hidden camera setup. Are you saying all of this is fabricated? Walker's composure cracks. Yes, he snaps. It's a conspiracy. Someone's framing me. How do you explain references to your locked desk? Or the email stating, no one will suspect a thing. God's work will continue. He pales but forces a brittle laugh. I don't write every email on my account. Could be hacked. Could be planted. A ripple of disbelief courses through the jury. The prosecutor doesn't even try to mask her contempt. In your journal, those pages detail each child you targeted. Are you telling us that's forged too? Walker's mouth works soundlessly for a moment. This is a witch hunt. I am innocent. The prosecutor's eyes flash. Innocent, yet every new piece of evidence points to your guilt. Reverend Walker, have you no remorse? His lawyer objects, calling the question inflammatory. The judge sustains it, but the impression sinks in. Walker was cornered. Outside, crowds shift from tension to near riot conditions. Police are stretched thin. Some chant for justice, while others pray for Walker's release, tears streaming down their faces.
Sis.
Dylan, leaving the courthouse under heavy guard, sees signs that read, Dylan's courage, Walker's power, and others that say, you'll regret this. That evening, Dylan's mother checks the locks on their doors twice. She stands at the window, arms folded. We're almost there, she whispers. From his bedroom, Dylan calls out softly, Mom. She steps in, finding him sitting on the edge of the bed, the crucifix glinting in his fingers. I'm okay, he says, voice tentative. Just thinking about tomorrow. She sits next to him, hugging him close. No matter what happens, you've already done so much good. He closes his eyes. Her warmth soothes him, the cross cool in his hand. I'm ready, he says though. Fear still coils in his stomach. I have to be. The final day of the trial dawns, and tension hangs in the air like the promise of a storm. The courtroom is packed, media at the back, crowd on either side. Dylan sits close to his mother, their hands interlocked. The jury emerges. The foreperson hands a slip of paper to the judge. Silence stretches. Madam Foreperson, the judge says, have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor, she answers, voice firm. The paper rattles slightly as the judge reads it. He looks up. Please deliver it to the court. She clears her throat. In the case of Reverend Elijah Walker on the charges of sexual misconduct, possession of illegal materials, and child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. An explosion of noise tears through the room. Some cheer, hugging one another in relief. Others cry out in anger and despair. A woman from Walker's congregation faints, while a few men roar protests about injustice. Cameras click in a frenzy. Order, the judge shouts, gavel slamming down. Order in the court. Officers approach Walker, who stands transfixed. They cuff his hands behind his back. His face is a portrait of shock and dread. For a moment he turns to look at Dylan. No words, just a haunted look, before being led away. In the swirl of bedlam, Dylan and his mother remain seated, holding each other's hands. Dylan says nothing, pressing his face into his mother's shoulder. She guides him through the throng, with the help of police. For the first time, he feels a flicker of real peace. That evening, they watch the news coverage. The anchor recaps Walker's conviction and announces a lengthy prison sentence. Footage shows the moment the phone, Dylan's cracked phone, was shown in court, calling it the catalyst for truth. Dylan's mother turns off the TV and looks at him. You did it, she murmurs. You saved more people than we'll ever know. He meets her gaze, exhaustion mingling with a profound sense of relief. Yeah, he says simply. I'm glad I did. Over the following days, more victims come forward, bolstered by Dylan's courage. The church is in disarray. Some congregants are furious. Others are grateful. The truth finally surfaced. Slowly, the community begins the rocky path toward healing. Dylan still flinches at loud noises sometimes. His nightmares aren't vanished, but each day they loosen their grip. He and his mom lock the doors at night and sleep a bit easier. Weeks have passed since the trial ended, though the echoes of Dylan's bravery still reverberate. Another local pastor steps in to rebuild trust with the congregation. Families are left to pick up the pieces of betrayal. For Dylan, life has found a new normal. No more reporters on the lawn. Fewer hateful notes jammed in the mailbox. Still, he keeps the last threat note pinned on a wall, like a reminder of what he stood against. On a warm afternoon, he and his mom relax on their small porch. The borrowed suit he once wore to court now hangs in a garment bag by the front door, obviously too small in the shoulders. Dylan eyes it for a moment, thoughts drifting. His mom catches the look. "You've outgrown that suit in more ways than one," she remarks softly, following his gaze. "But it served its purpose." He nods, thoughtful. "I remember how it felt that first day in court. I was so scared." She places a hand on his. "Bravery doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means you do what's right anyway." Dylan's notebook rests on his lap, half filled with short reflections. He scribbles a final line. "The suit was too big, but my voice fit just right." His mom peeks at the words, a gentle smile forming. "That's a good line," she says. He shrugs, embarrassed. "I just don't want to forget." "You won't," she assures him. "You couldn't, even if you tried." They fall into a comfortable quiet. The sun warms the porch, and for the first time in what feels like forever, Dylan can breathe without feeling a weight on his chest. In his bedroom later, the cracked phone sits on his nightstand. Next to it is the crucifix his grandmother gave him. The memory of her voice, "Being black here means being braver than everyone else," echoes in his mind. But now it feels more like a badge of honor than a burden. He lifts the crucifix, runs his fingers over its edges, and sets it carefully beside the phone. For a moment he stands there, gazing at these two symbols of his fight, proof of truth and a legacy of courage. Then he flips off the light and climbs into bed. The nightmares haven't completely gone away, but they're fading, day by day. He's not that trembling boy in the too big suit anymore. Tomorrow waits, and for once, it doesn't feel so terrifying. Holding on to the quiet peace in his chest, Dylan closes his eyes, letting himself drift towards sleep.